And we are live. Hello, Abba calling. I'm here with my good friend Felicia Murrell, and Charlie is sadly not here with us today. He might jump on later. And but yeah, for those of you who don't know you, Felicia, what can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your new book, upcoming book that's being published on the 13th February? Is that right?
Yes,
Yes. Yes.
coming up soon in about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
My
Exciting.
name is Felicia, as you said, and I am currently living in the United States in Woodbury, Minnesota. And my husband and I are former pastors. We were in church leadership for over 20 years, and then he branched off into more nonprofit executive management space. And I started doing more spiritual direction and writing and some itinerant speaking, which is primarily the path of my life. And then vocationally, I serve as a copy editor for the publishing industry, working with some small to medium publishing houses and some independent authors who use my services as well. But primarily how I kind of do the dance of life with love is in spiritual direction and walking other people through their spiritual journeys. So I'm excited to share my new book. And as you said, it'll be coming out 13th February. And I can't wait to share this with everyone. So thanks for having me on today, Florian.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I mean, we've been doing podcasts together with our friend John McDonald, and so we've been on podcasts together, and it's always a joy talking to you. And what you're bringing to the table is, I think, is so important. Yeah, I read through the book. You sent me or your publishing companies or agent sent me a published copy, and it's I think it's an amazing book. It's so much needed for the day, and I really like how I know we both came from these circles of this revelation of the Father's love, and how you found a language which I find speaks to people even who are not of our faith tradition, and I really love that about the book. And yet, it comes very clearly over what you're communicating, and yeah, I really appreciated that about the book. Was that something you did on purpose, or?
I really appreciate that question. It's something that I did with a lot of intentionality. And so the core of who I am and what has transformed me has been that revelation of the Father's love. It's my anchor. It is the seal that's set upon my heart. So I think love will always inform and influence everything. And I think inside of the freedom of love, what has happened in that space has been a turning toward other people, their pain, their injustices, their invisibility, and where they've been left out or looked
Mm,
over. And so, what I wanted to do very intentionally was hold the language with care in the sense that it was affirming and inclusive and um, non-binary really. So my publisher and I did a lot of talking about that because they weren't quite sure if people were ready for a total non-gendered language for God. And so I needed to pause and think about what's true to me and how I refer to God and how I talk about God and about the divine. And at the same time, open up the circle wide enough to include those who may feel left out or harmed or triggered by some of the more, masculine pronouns or patriarchal language. And so for me, I used love quite often in talking about the divine or talking about God. Um, and then I just tried to be very, very intentional about including everyone in that language. So yeah, it was definitely on purpose. Yeah.
I love that, and yeah, I was actually just writing something about how even the term Abba that Jesus used for God is not a patriarchal term, but a parental term. So it is more about this attitude towards it. I don't even want to use the word attitude, but this intention towards us. This how love is reaching out to us in a parental sense, and we both know it includes his or their motherhood. There we go with the pronouns. But the mother heart.
And I still very much use Abba too, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the term of endearment, the like you said, that parental love. And that today in the shower, I was just lifting my hands in adoration, and what comes out is Abba, and because there's a for me anyway, there is a very personal intimacy in my turning toward the divine and turning toward love, and I can't ever shed that face to face kind of communing, and that came through Abba. It came through. I grew up with a God in heaven who punished, a God that enforced, and all of that, and so it was the Father's love. It was knowing that I had a dad who loved me, a dad who ran toward me, and so I very much still say Papa or Abba. It's just woven into the fabric of who I am. And I also include, what's true to me, and I can transcend and move beyond that and widen the circle to include other as well. So I it's not like I discarded it or cut it off. I still very much in my own quiet reflection and prayer time, and have that language. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of the Shack, where Papa is a Black African woman, and how William Young, how he managed to, I think, who recommended your book, if I remember correctly, right? He wrote something in the beginning of your book. He recommended it, and how he managed to put this exactly together, transcending, or the including and transcending, and Richard Rohr would say, and I like the quotes you have in the book and the sources you bring into the book, and yet it's how would you describe it? I find it hard to describe because it's not a devotional, but it's also not a like a I don't know what to say. How would you describe your book?
I love that. I wish it would have been a devotional. I would have loved that because I love devotionals. And so I do hope that it becomes for many a coffee table book in that way, or a bedside table book, where someone could just open randomly to one of the pages. I love that the publisher used the big ampersand and to mark where each piece begins, and that they could just read a piece and then sit in the quiet of, the stirring of what that piece does for their heart. It is listed as poetry, and so the book would probably be described as a mix of both poetry and prose, or a poetic prose. Since there are some long form articles and essays included as well in there. But I did want to create a devotional like feel, in that it would be something that you could read a short piece, sit with it, savor it, meditate on it, maybe go walk and, have a conversation with spirit about what rises, what challenges, what stirs, and then put it down, and then maybe when you're sipping your morning coffee, you could read another piece, or, at night before you go to bed, that kind of thing. But that was the heart of my intention when I kind of crafted the flow of it. So there's not the normal structured, chapters to it, or even names for every piece, because I wanted it to have the invitation to just like kind of potluck, open a page and, oh, okay, let's see what that is. Maybe read in the front, read toward the back, I hope people do that with it. So
it definitely does that. That's the feel it had for me. It has this devotional element in it, but I wasn't quite sure how to categorize it. And that's probably the beauty of the book, is that you don't have to categorize it. What you just described basically is also breaking open these form patriarchal ideas, of how we need to learn, how we need to take in information or revelation or whatever. And yeah, I really like that about it. And I can really imagine it's something people put on their coffee table or the bedside and just take it out and reflect on it. And it's not something, I have to say, it's not something you read in one sitting or quickly. You need to digest it. And it's really a book that speaks to the heart. And what I loved about it is that even though you speak about this love and inclusivity, it also includes things like anger and frustration and grief and about the things that are in the world. And it's not like love being fluffy, pink cloud kind of thing. It's like it speaks to something that really the longing of the human heart for love to encounter us where we're at.
yeah.
You want to say something about that?
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. I think 2 points rise. One is what first comes to mind is, and I think this is Father Richard Rohr too, but he says, love sees fully and loves what it sees. And I think, truth is rooted in the soil of love, right? And so in order for truth to blossom and flourish, it has to be grounded in love soil, in the sense that when we come to life from even the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, where we deem anger bad, frustration bad, anything negative as bad, and these other ways good, then what we do is we compare ourselves or we parse ourselves. And we want to take everything that we have been told is bad and cut it off and put it away from us. So we end up very fragmented. But when I say that truth is rooted in the soil of love, when I plant myself in love, right? When that's the tree of life from which I live, truth says, I am also angry. I am also frustrated. I also feel this injustice. And I don't set that aside from me. I hold it very truthfully and honestly. Inside of my relationship with love, inside of that grounding. And then I ask love, how do I participate with this? What does this look like flowing through me and coming forth? So I name the anger. I pause and I sense where I'm feeling that in my body, and I touch it, and I allow spirit to be there with me so that it's seen in the light of love. And then it may come out in a poem, which there's several, or article or essay or whatever. It may come out in a way that hopefully is an invitation to wholeness, that is an invitation to right alignment, which is all justice is. It's just about right alignment. That is that invitation. And you're right about love. Love is fiery, right? And sometimes fire warms and sometimes fire burns, depending on how we get with it. The same with the force of water, like a waterfall is so majestic and beautiful to look at. But if you hit that spray the wrong way, it could do some damage to your skin. And so what we want is to have this balance of our dance of love that always maintains loving kindness and tenderness, and I was saying gentleness and tender in my head at the same time. That maintains the gentleness, that maintains the tenderness, that maintains empathy and compassion, and all these parts. And at the same time maintains the fierceness and the honesty and all of the emotions that you feel when you see the goings on in the world today and how it impacts people.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you, the way you write it, I mean, you're a very gifted writer, and as I said, it really speaks
Thank
directly to one's heart. And I find it, the way you describe love, I mean, that's exactly how I think we see the God Jesus portrayed. This tenderness and yet this fierceness, and it's not a contradiction, and who accepts us in everything that we are, and stepped into our darkest parts in that sense. I thought for a long time, when dealing with like healing ministries and things like that, a lot of healing ministry in the Christian church has become about getting rid of negative emotions, and getting rid of the negative, what we consider negative parts of us, rather than integrating. And where I actually think, yeah, we need voices like you, and and more indigenous voices who are far more aware of these things, how to integrate, how, and you speak about that too in the book, how to witness each other's pain, and the grief, and the over injustice, and the frustration, and not to push that from us. I thought it was very interesting what you said about that in a lot of Christian spaces, that in the Western world there is this attitude of politeness. You need to be polite, and that is connected to sweeping everything under the carpet, and people immediately die, basically. And where whereas in other cultures it's not like that. And yeah,
Yeah, I did inner healing ministry for years. I trained people, I taught people in inner healing modalities. So I was deeply rooted, and I, because I was so invested in it, I learned several different inner healing modalities from different ministries and things. And you're right, the majority of them is about the cutting off or the getting rid of. And I just, as I've journeyed with love, I kept, integration was probably the first word that love gave me there. And I kept getting an invitation from love to really look at what wholeness is, right? And wholeness is not just holding our good parts, wholeness is all of us, all of who we are, all of the we name them, again, the binaries, we name them good, bad, we have to measure them, we have to weigh them and create a standard. And I think what I really felt from love when I sit with the divine face to face is, there's no part of me that love is afraid of. There's no part of me that love is disillusioned about, because love has no illusions. Love sees fully, and love, all that love sees. And so there started being this invitation of, do I believe what love believes about me? Do I see what love sees? And as I begin to see what love sees and come into alignment with it, then I start walking that out. The way of my being begins to manifest the wholeness of that. But the wholeness of that is, sometimes I might be afraid of something. And in my fear, if I don't pause and take a moment to feel the fullness of love and to feel love's participation in it, then I'm going to respond in a way that does not, create freedom or flourishing or wholeness for another person. And I
yeah,
have to own that truth about myself. And the way that I own that is with a lot of compassion and tenderness, and yeah. But it doesn't mean I like cut it off or deny that part exists. So
yeah, yeah. You also talked in the book about how the difference, how certain communities grow up with different experiences of, like the Black community, versus white people in America, how they grow up experiencing history and remembering history differently, and things like that. And I think there it's especially important to face this grief and the anger behind it, and we sometimes can just see the anger, not see the grief underneath it. We can't, or even how it might be important for people to get over the fear, that they've grown up all their lives with, and sometimes, like, I believe in non-violence, but there is something about when someone has an outburst and they stand up to an abuser, we can point a finger and say, "Oh, they're being violent," and things like that. But in the end, maybe they had to learn to become more fearless and make the voice heard. And under that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we just categorize people rather than actually seeing what's really going on. I hope I say that right, but so in the tree of life, it includes everything, and in this relationship of love.
Yeah.
To explain myself right?
I totally agree with you, because I also think that, in that relationship with love, it invites us, really, it requires us to commune with one another, right? We have to be present. And so there's a lot in the book about being present to the present moment and that sort of thing, because it's not a life that's lived unconsciously, that's lived on rote, or that's lived in a formula. And I think we want the formula. We just tell us what to do and I'll do it. Just give me the 1, 2, 3 steps of how to create a happy life, of how to have good relationships with my kids or with my husband or with my sister or whomever. And if you give me these steps, I can memorize them and I don't have to be present. And I don't think that is the life that love invites us into. I think in the dance, being present to what's before us and that communing, it takes some honesty and some openness and some vulnerability, and we have to live in such a way that we're there, that we show up.
Yeah.
So I hope that through several times in the book. I don't know that we have been allowed in our world, because it's been so heavily patriarchal and masculine driven, to have a place for grief, for mourning, for lament. It's been buckle up, shore up, armor up, fix, resolve, or deny, all these things. And so I hope that there's some pauses and some invitation within the book to stop and be honest with what needs to be grieved within us, what needs to be mourned, where we need to acknowledge and have some truth telling, and then lament. And that's not necessarily something that comes with fix or resolve or solutions. It's just feeling. And so this book it will drop people down into their feelings. I hope at least that it does, that it drops people to sit with spirit in their feelings and to feel what rises and to let that stir, and just to be present with it. Not that you have to do anything. I say several times, feelings don't require fixing. They just are being asked to be felt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. No, it definitely did that for me. The book definitely did that for me. And how should I say? It's what you also very clearly speak about how to avoid ideological pitfalls, which is also just an expression of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, by addressing injustice and how to bring love into these situations without damping things down, without sweeping things under the carpet, really facing the truth of where the truth of our being and the way of our being don't align, and I think the book really does that, and that's why I would love to see people have it on the coffee table next to the bed or something, and maybe even a guest picking it up, visiting your house, and just reads it and takes it with them and said, "I'm gonna buy this book," And I mean, I'm definitely gonna recommend it to a lot of people. And
Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to say something about this binary thinking, the dualisms we grow up in, especially in the Western world, and how to address these issues that, I mean, in different societies and cultures we wrestle on the surface we wrestle with different things. Like in Europe, we've got different things than in America, but then it's just on the surface like that. If you look underneath it all, it's the same issue. And do you want to speak to that, or?
Yeah, I can at least try. I think one of the things that I've been noticing over the last probably decade and a half, really, as I've journeyed with love in this part of my life, I kept seeing a bridge. And I felt like love was saying to me that A-N-D, was the bridge to our return, or the way that we turn toward one another. Because a lot of what's happening with binaries, or, with dualism, essentially you think about poles, you have these two poles. And so is his, hers, white, black, it's one political party, the other political party, they're all, it's either or, it's this or this. No way for it to be bi or to be both. And bridges that, right? So when I have these either or things, there's this chasm that's created. And it becomes a bridge that links a place. And Doug and I, in our marriage, we have a pillar that I think really helps us sustain. We've been married for 30 plus years, but for us, unconditional acceptance is the foundation of a healthy relationship, right? I learned that from a man named Danny Silk, and it's really been a pillar for us, because what it allows for Doug to be fully Doug and me to be fully me. I'm not trying to change Doug. He's not trying to change me. We allow the journey. Part of the reason why we're able to allow is because we trust love. We trust love with ourselves. We trust love with one another. We trust that love will bring us into the fullness of who we are to be in love. And we don't need to fix each other on that journey, or force the journey along. We can allow, we can surrender to love in that way. And I think so much of what we see in binaries, in dualism, is that we don't know how to allow space for things that are not like us. We do not know how to allow space for ideals and ideologies that are different from our own. Because back to the binaries, in that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it either has to be right or it has to be wrong. And if I determine that right is more important than being in relationship, I don't lean on unconditional acceptance. I lean on control, domination, manipulation, and trying to force you to live your life the way I live mine. And so and becomes a bridge that restores, and it allows a place for us to stand together, even if we don't think the same or believe the same or look the same or are the same. And is big enough to hold the distinctions of personhood, the distinctions of belief, with compassion instead of fear. And so I'll stop there, but I hope that becomes very clear in a way that isn't like, I want you to be like me. Really what I want is just for you to allow me to be, I am, may you be. I am a burning bush. I am a sacred, inherent, divine human. May you also be that as well, and let's be that together in the world.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, you reference a lot in the book. You speak about the three in one, or the triune love, and use this Trinitarian language. It comes very strongly through, despite all you not using traditional language, and this kind of coming together of union and distinction, that to honor personhood, which can only really develop inside of a relationship. And I think that is really the title of the book, "End." To the transforming power of love, and I think that's what we were just talking about. And yeah, when we come to this place, we're no longer trying to, as you so beautifully describe it in the book, to try to change each other and put our ideologies upon each other. And it includes difficult conversations and sitting with the discomfort as well. They're not pushing the negative away again, and listening in these painful situations, or the things we bring into our relationship from past trauma, generational trauma, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, I think, what I want to say now, I almost lost my thread now. So, but it's in this relationship and where we find our own relationships and let each other be, and personhood can develop, that we actually only that we only can find true union by being fully ourselves. And I was just thinking about, what does that mean when we have this idea of being like Jesus, because he doesn't want us to make us, a Jewish carpenter 2,000 years ago, but what does it mean for me? I've got my idea for you. I've got my ideas, but what does that mean for you? Or do you still even use that concept, being like Jesus?
Yeah, it's so interesting. For me, being like Jesus is to follow the way of love, and I'm so intrigued by the fact that we have this Bible that's been put together by humans who decided which canons would go in it and which canons would not. And we never think about the fact that we have elevated this without holding humanity, the whole of humanity, all of our humanness, and who created this book that we have made an idol out of, because for a lot of Christians, the Bible is an idol. But inside of this Bible, inside of these canons, there's a small little section about a wisdom teacher named Jesus and who he was and how he lived. And I'm struck by the fact that you have this whole Bible and you have this small section about Jesus. And so I was telling someone this the other day. For me, I'm looking at this section about Jesus, who he is, how he lived, the small 3 years of recorded history of him with his disciples and with people, how he responded, how he went away to have that quiet time with his Father, right? You see this ebb and a flow of him coming in and moving out, of being in community, being with his Abba, his Father, in the quiet place. And from that place of fortitude and strength, giving out, being self-emptying, the kenosis, right?
Yeah.
But you have this whole book and this small part about Jesus. And I could either make the framework of my life about the whole book, or I can make the framework of my life about how Jesus moved and lived and have his being, and then read the whole book through that lens. And it makes such a difference, right? Because if I read the whole book, forgetting that this book says more about our humanity, all of it, the messy complexities, the violence, the propensity towards wanting revenge and to exact, revenge on others, and all those parts of ourselves that we want to force and make right and dominate. If I forget that this is humans with a pen telling their stories, whether anthropological or literal or historical, that they're set in a context. These are humans that are writing this story, that are full of emotion. They're trying to make meaning of their life, right? If I forget that, and I don't come to this book through the lens of Jesus, then I start turning God into an image of the humans, instead of seeing the humans through the lens of a loving God who gives of himself, who gives of their self, to the world, right? And so for me, the way of Jesus himself is the way of love, right? And I'm holding that with thinking about in the Western tradition, we lean more towards living from our heads. Everything has to make sense. It has to make meaning. It needs to be rational or logical. How can you prove this? Where in the Bible does it say this? Someone asked the question, how can we say that God is love? Is it okay to call God love? I want to be right. Tell me where this is in the Bible so I can say the right thing. And in the Eastern tradition, particularly in Taoism, they talk a lot about contradictions and holding contradictions in mystery. There's a place for both things to be true or both things to exist without needing to parse them or resolve them. And that's what I want with the way of love. I want to be able to look at the life of Jesus and see how Jesus held the whole of humanity, the whole of his divinity, the whole of communing and welcomed. And then I want to follow the way of Jesus with my life in the sense that more than anything, when I wake up in the morning, I ask the question of love. Love, what is it that you would have me to do? Love, open my eyes to what you are doing and show me where you're inviting me to participate with you in this today, And that, honestly, it might be just me sitting on the couch because what love is doing is resting, It might be engaging in social media because there's someone at home who's shut in and their only engagement is to be on social media. So me going back and forth with that person becomes communion for them, and so however that looks, I just want to be alive enough and intentional and aware enough to participate with love, with the truth of my being. And for me, that's the way of Jesus.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was thinking about his statement that to follow him, take up your cross, and how we often represented or presented it in a legalistic way or whatever, or like you need to kill off some bad thing in you or something. But he was saying the same thing there. Follow me and trust love, even while the systems of this world try to kill you. Because that's what it was about, the Romans crucifying people, and how it's more about this to step into this uncertain future with love, where and actually trust him. And that's the way of Jesus. I agree with you there. That's come to see that more and more like that as well. To just love and trust, these two things working together, which is a better translation than faith,
Yes.
which we then make about belief and doctrines and stuff like that, rather than leaning into this love of Abba, the Jesus called Abba. And
I mean, I'm really struck that, Jesus was in his community. Like, he's walking the streets, right? All of this stuff is going on around him. He wasn't hiding in a house somewhere with his head in the sand in denial about the Roman Empire. He wasn't, and he also very much only did what he saw his father doing and only said what he heard his father saying. And so there was a way that he carried himself that was very much rooted in what I would call love, which, is his father. So there was a sense of participation, right? There's always this active participation between Jesus and his father and spirit that is there throughout his entire ministry. And I just think it overshadowed the whole of who he was. And so that's part of the dance that I'm being invited into, I feel, is how that same way of being out about in my community, in the world, and the things that are going on in our world. But I can't do that in a way that is life-giving, transforming, kenotic, if I do not have the quiet time of stillness and solitude and turning aside to be with love, to sit face to face to face and hear what love is saying and to see what love is doing, right? I can't. You need both ends. You have to have some spiritual practice or solitude or something where you are turning aside to be in and receive, to receive that love into you so that you can go out and give that away.
It's and I'm going to ask you more about this, but it's this process of breathing in and breathing out, right? It's like, yeah. And if you think about it, spirit being the same word in Greek and Hebrew than breath, it's joining this rhythm. And I could clearly see, because I read your first book. It's not your first book, but this is your first book, which has already been published for a couple of years. And I can really see how everything you learned and the revelations you share in this new book have grown out of this time of listening to love. And
that means so much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because we here in the Abba calling community, that's what we're all about. You read Charlie's book, and so it's about a lot of his journey, and my own journey has come out of this listening to love, sitting with them, and letting them work on our hearts and facing the lies we believe about ourselves, about others, and you mentioned it in the book too, the cultural lies we grow up with, the boxes we're being put in, and even what we think about it, who we are as men or women or orientations and all stuff, race and whatever you throw in the mix. But how it starts off with this: you start first in your own home and your own heart, but it grows into something larger, like Jesus talked, the mustard seed. And I can clearly see that. So do you want to talk a little bit about what spiritual practices are you engaging in?
Oh man, I engage in quite a bit of spiritual practices. I do still very much do what we probably call soaking prayer, which is a kind of quiet resting with love, knowing that love is there with me, and sitting. I do the practice of centering prayer on my cushion. I spend 20 minutes. I do some embodied prayer practices where I'm, opening my hands and receiving love. I'm crossing my arms across my chest to show that I'm tethered. I am, opening my palms to surrender. And so just some swaying or, movement. I do some very mindful walking and just being outside, communing with nature in that way, communing with love in that way. Because what I try to do is wake up each day and ask of love, ask of myself, like sense in my body, what is it that I need for this day? What's calling to me? And I listen. And so if I feel like that is to put on some, quiet music and soak, then I'll do soaking prayer. I pretty consistently use what I call 3 M's, which is meditation, some form of meditation, whether that's a mindful walking, soaking prayer, centering prayer, morning pages, which is simply just kind of writing a little bit of what rises from me, or either reading. So either writing or reading. So I always keep a poetry book or a devotional by my bedstand, and I may pick it up and read a few pages. And then the other M is movement. I do some type of just welcoming, myself into my body for the day and welcoming spirit to be with me in my body. That could be moving back from side to side, or some yoga, or some stretching, or just, like I said, those somatic body movements. But that's my spiritual practice, and it changes based on what I need. I've really gotten into the habit of, after years and years of a Christianity that told me I had to read my Bible every day, I had to pray every day, I had to do it like this way with these people. I wanted to release that. And I wanted to be more intentional about being present. And I realized that in being present, practice is what the moment calls for, you know? And so what I've learned to do is to say yes until it's no. And that's my spiritual practice, to say yes until it's no.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we seem to have been on a very similar journey. So it's very similar for me, and especially the whole embodiment part, and engaging more in embodied practices has helped me a lot to also deal with trauma and stuff like that. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
you've got
the breath work, tapping. I have been amazed at one of the things I don't know. I do think it's a response to trauma. I think, but I realize about myself is that I lived most of my life numb and distant from my own self, because I honestly, I feel like, I felt like if I tapped into the grief, if I allowed myself to feel it, I would not be able to. I want to honestly say I felt like I would lose my mind. I felt like I would lose my pillar of certainty if I allowed myself to feel the depth of anguish and pain. And I was scared of that. And so how I survived that was to keep it at a distance, to keep it far out here away from me, to act as if it didn't exist. And in the safety of love's presence, when I was able, what I learned to do was ask my body, are we ready for this? Because I realized that it wasn't out there. My body was holding all of that. My body was holding every memory, every anguish, every story, every traumatic thing. It's there. It's right there. And so when I understood that, I turned toward myself, toward my own body, and thanked it for holding all of that stuff until I was ready. And I didn't want to rush the process. So I would ask my body, body, is there something that you want me to know?
yeah.
And I would pause and listen and let my body speak to me. And there's an article actually in the prose piece in the book about an interaction with my body in that way. But slowly, in the presence of love, my body would bring to the surface things that we needed to touch and sit with and deal with. And I could grieve them and I could mourn them. And I realized that in the safety of love, not that love was protecting me, but love was definitely sustaining me, right? And in love's sustenance, I could trust my body to bring up what I needed to face, to feel what I needed to feel, and to sit with and mourn. And what happened was something I didn't know would happen, but there's an alchemy that happens. There's a transformation that happens in that process of being with and turning toward, in a way that I understood. Jesus endured the cross for the joy that was set before him, because the turning toward and facing those parts of myself, those traumatic parts, the anguish, the depth of that, was an enduring of the cross in a lot of ways. And on the other side of that, joy happened, contentment happened. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the process That started with a revelation of the Father's love. Because if I did not come to know that love loves me because love loves me and that love is loving me right now, I would have never learned to trust love, sustenance, that love could sustain me to turn toward myself and allow myself to face myself in that way. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, that this distinction you make between protection and sustaining. Because when we hear the word protection, we always think it's avoiding, basically. But when we say it more as a sustaining, it, as you said, we can face the stuff in our life and dive deep. And only when we know we are loved, we're really able to look at these things. When we know every part of us is loved, and not just the things we present as good, spiritual or Christian or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah,
My teacher, Jim Finley, he says, love is a substance that protects you from nothing, even as it sustains you in all things. And he says that the taproot of his heart is grounded in knowing that love is a presence, not a substance. I'm sorry. Love is a presence, capital P. Love is a presence that protects us from nothing, even as it sustains us in all things. And I think about that. I remember my daughter, a situation in high school, some things happened, and I went on a walk with love, and I was so frustrated and mad, and I literally was like railing at God because I'm like, we're ministers, we do this, we've done this, we're doing all these things in your name. We've created this environment in our house where our kids can be free and safe. And I'm just like mad and I'm railing. I am railing. How could you not protect her? What do you mean? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like exploding at God. I get it all out and I get back home. And later I happen to be sitting in my quiet time. And I realized in that moment, like, oh, okay, I did a magic genie God thing. In my head, I thought that if I did XYZ, which I had said was all the right things, that this home would become like a bubble and it would protect my kids from experiencing anything bad in the world, right? And then because I imagined that the world had pierced that bubble and got to one of my kids, which was supposed to be protected because I was doing all these things for God and doing all these right things according to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That she was going to be protected and she wasn't. And now I'm mad at God because I felt like God failed. But did he? Or had I created a whole ideology out of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil about protection that love never intended for me to even believe or own? And so when I heard Jim Finley say that, I immediately was taken back to that experience in 2014. And I mean, that's been 10 years now. And I'm like, this is it. But when I look back at that, I do know that God sustained us, love sustained us. And I can look at the whole of my life, all 51 years of it, and know that there have been a lot that I was not protected from. But through all of it, love has indeed sustained. Yeah.
that's beautiful. Yeah, I've been there. I've been in these places, so I
Yes.
know what you're talking about. It usually has to do with the kids. Yeah.
Yes.
But I can totally relate to this idea that we created this bubble that now has been pierced and because and where are you God now? I mean, I there were times when I said to God, if I could, I would walk away, But that's the thing, you can't walk away from love. She's following you where we go, and or where we go, she's already there. Or however, with the limitations of human language, but Is there anything that's really important for you that you want to say before we finish? Or
I don't think so. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share about the book. I'm excited for people to get it and to read it, and just for the opportunity to be in conversation with you around, you know, a person that we dearly love. So I'm excited that we share that in common.
yes. Well, where can people get your book? Yeah.
Oh, that's important, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think pretty much any of the Amazon it will be available on Amazon. If you are a person that likes to use independent booksellers, it will be available with bookshop.org. My publisher, Whitaker House, will have it available on their website as well. And I do know that Barnes and Nobles is also carrying it. So I think pretty much all of the major retail book outlets will have it available for sale.
And you can pre-order it on Amazon, so that would help. You can already give in your order if
Yes.
and I highly recommend the book. Go and get it. Where can people reach you? So
Yeah, I'm available at feliciamurrell.com. That's my website. And then I'm over at Instagram at hello Felicia _Murrell, Murrell. And then I'm on Facebook. I'm probably on Facebook more than any place. I'm one of those people that I like that interaction. And so I can be followed there on Facebook as well. Yeah, I would love for people to reach out. I would love to know how they're dancing with and as they read the book and encounter it, and that it would mean so much to me to hear that feedback. So thank you.
And then go and write a 5-star review on Amazon. Yeah, you stay on for a moment. I'm finishing the recording now and say goodbye to our listeners. I want to keep you on for a moment.
Okay.
And yeah, guys, I hope you really enjoyed this interview. I certainly did. Go and get the book. Reach out to Felicia if you want to know more about the story of her story with love. Or forget her other book. It's also on Amazon. It's a great book. And for those who come more from a traditional Christian background, you might find that an easier start. But get both. Go and put in a big order. And yeah, next time I hope Charlie is with us again. And I hope you had all a great time. We love you and speak to you soon. Bye.